not sure what's the tougher task, being the only thing between lunch and you, or following Carolyn. This reminds me, Jennifer will appreciate this. We have the task, if you're on a committee or a commission at your local parish, of making an announcement after communion. And we happen to have in our little parish a really, really good choir. And they'll do a meditation hymn after communion, and everybody's all totally moved, and then you have to get up and stand and talk about, the Evangelization Commission will meet on Saturday at 10 a.m. And it's a tough act to follow, Sister Carolyn. A tough act to follow. Thank you. This is going to be very little about me and mostly about the work that we've been able to pull together in our little corner of Northwest Detroit. But let me just say that I'm happy to be a member of the Divine Mercy region with our minister Jim Graychuk, and a member of the St. Bonaventure Fraternity, where you all held your chapter back in October, where Eileen Smith is my minister. And that little piece of the Lower East Side of Detroit is where we live, just a couple miles away. I'm thrilled that Jennifer is here. My wife, Jennifer, please stand. Jennifer didn't quite believe that we were coming to get some sort of national recognition, so we gave up on trying to get her to come for that reason. But just earlier this week, she said, "Steve, can we go someplace that has more humidity than Detroit, Michigan?" And I said, "Why don't we go to St. Louis for the day on Wednesday?" And it just so happens the chapter's meeting here, and they're giving this GPIC award, so wouldn't you know? So in any case, enough about that. I'm a lifelong member of a little church in Northwest Detroit that's named St. Suzanne, Our Lady Gate of Heaven. It was a very large parish with 4,000 members and more masses than you could count on both of your hands back in the day. We're much smaller in terms of parishioners and collection and number of priests and all those sort of things, but I'd like to think that in many ways we're stronger in a lot of other ways that it counts. So a little story about one of our projects, the St. Suzanne's Cody Rouge Community Resource Center. So we had a Catholic school in the building that we currently operate as a community center. I went to school there 150 years ago. We are having our 150th reunion this October. This is the class that was just before me when we had 56 students in the class. We only had 40 when I was there in the class in 2 sessions. But we stopped having a Catholic school due to demand and other things in 2002. And we did what virtually some of your parishes at home, if you live in a city, may do the similar things. In the Detroit area, especially with the preponderance of charter schools and these big buildings, when you close your Catholic school, what are you going to do with your building? The roof is going to burn down, somebody's going to steal all your windows, how are you going to pay operational costs, and all these things. So we did immediately rush to rent the entire building to a charter school, which was great income and a really stable existence in that regard. They left after a short time. We brought another charter school in. And this isn't about charter schools. It's only to say that we can convince ourselves. I would stand at the lectern after Mass, our pastors would, and say, well, we had this time, treasure, and talents thing, and for many years we had the education as one of the things that we did, and now we're giving one of our treasures, the building, over to others to educate the little kiddies in this neighborhood. But that isn't true at all. Basically, you're the landlord and you're making money, and that's it. So at the time that the second charter school left and a couple of other transitions, we really grappled with sitting across the street in the parish offices. Our mission statement says we should serve the needs of our neighborhood community as well as our faith community, and could we do something more meaningful? And through to a number of things, including folks much smarter than a number of us, brought together some planning for what we could do to turn the building into a sustainable community resource center. And I say sustainable because that's really one of the methods to our magic, and that is to have something that we can continue doing that isn't based on just a grant that comes. And anyone apply for grants recently? Grants come and grants go, right, Carolyn? And that sort of thing happens. So we created a business model, an actual business model, that allows us to defray a lot of costs to the parish, to send some money back to the parish, and to operate a full-range community resource center. And this is what the school looked like before. And this is just a couple of headlines when we did that, but this is kind of some recent photos from some stuff that we've done during the summer, through a summer camp, through a grand opening of a community center for the City Council District Office, and some other things as well. So when we made the change, our pastor at the time, Father Vic Clore, who was masterful at having short but extremely wise statements, said, well, we cannot be just the landlord now, we can be the landlord and convener. And a couple of us really ran with that concept of being convener, because if you're the convener, you can be picky and choosy, you can have quality standards, and most of all, you can try to be the instrument by which the community has voice to say that these are some services and programs that are needed in the community, and they're not in existence in the forms and the level that they need to be to really serve the needs of the community. And in our case, that was early childhood education, it was after-school youth development, it was senior citizens programs, it was community and economic development, and all these things. So long story short, after some really interesting and scary stages along the route, we've been doing that now for 5 years. We're stable. We do send a few dollars back to the parish. We're full. We're trying to purchase the former convent that hasn't been owned by the Archdiocese or the parish in a number of years to expand our services. Last year we had 67,000 people come through the doors of the building to gain services of various points as well. One of the strategies is to be hyper neighborhood centric. So I've been a member of the parish my entire life, still own my family home in the neighborhood, am there 16 hours a day, oftentimes walking the streets, but it's not for me to say to the members of the Cody Rouge neighborhood what you need, right? So we're hyper neighborhood centric. Our board of directors are all neighborhood folks. They're not big fundraisers. They're block club presidents and local business owners and nonprofit leaders. All of my staff are residents of the city of Detroit, and 85% of them live right in this neighborhood. All of our contractors and vendors are Detroit-based, and all those things are important, at least where we come from in Detroit, where there just isn't enough economic investment in things like that as well. So a couple other little projects that we've been involved with. So we talked about those folks that were much smarter than us creating kind of the business plan. And if anyone started a small company or a small nonprofit, you know that somebody you create or somebody creates a pro forma, a little budget that says how much income you're going to have and how many expenses how much you're going to have. And if you're sharp, you normally show your board or your spouse or anyone else who's watching these things closely, look, our expenses are like $1 more than or $1 less, excuse me. If you're not smart, you wouldn't do that, than your income, right? Because basically every dollar is accounted for. And we were just going through this grueling process and a lot of heartbreak along the way. And the consultants said, well, you should plan to have another $24,000 annual fee to a group called the Detroit Water and Sewage Department for something called a drainage fee. A well-intended thing to basically account for the fact that we have too much stormwater and we have a combined municipal sewer system, which I can lecture you all on over lunch if you're interested in that geeky stuff. But when there's too much water, the sanitary sewage and your rainwater sewage combined goes into a single pipe, and that pipe overflows into tributaries and the Detroit River and the nearby Rouge River and all these things. And it's very costly, as evidenced by the estimate for $24,000 a year. So we said, what could we do rather than just give up? And we started hanging out with some groups that we didn't realize we didn't previously have a relationship with, the Friends of the Rouge, the Sierra Club, the Fish and Wildlife Foundation, and all these things, and got to talking about what if we created a strategy that if we had surrounded, I should say I missed a point here. So the Detroit Water and Sewage Department says you can mitigate this drainage fee and mitigate the stormwater runoff by building retention-detention facilities on your campus. Many people call them rain gardens. And rain gardens, the way to do them right and to engineer them and to get the drainage credits are actually quite costly. They gave us a report that says here's 9 places on your 5-acre campus that you can build a rain garden, and here is the cost, and here is the resulting return on investment. And I kid you not, of the 9, the average ROI was 26.3 years, and the 2 highest ones were 42.2 years. So I don't know about Amazon and General Motors, but they probably wouldn't invest in anything with a return on investment of 42.2 years. And I'm like, we're just trying to make it through August. What part don't you understand here, right? So we said, what could we do to perhaps surround this in our community spirit with authentic educational programs, both for the kiddies and adults, and a workforce development component. And maybe that would be an innovative enough idea that some folks would give us some grant money that would pay for the installation of the rain gardens and pay for the educational programs. And that has turned out to be an amazing blessing along the way. We have amazing diverse sources of funding from all kinds of folks, local, the Adrian Dominican Sisters, the Sisters of Mercy in terms of religious congregations, the local diocese, the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, the National Wildlife Federation, the Sierra Club, and all these things. And we have disconnected 26 downspouts off of 3 large buildings. We are diverting an estimated 600,000 gallons of water away from the city's municipal combined sewer overflow each year. And most importantly, we've involved now 131 youth and adults in these semester-long education programs where they learn all about the water cycle, how water comes down, water goes up on the earth. You tell a group of middle school students in the Cody Rouge neighborhood, you know that when it rains tomorrow, that's not new water. That's water that's recycled and gone up and come down. They're like, oh, that's kind of interesting, and that. So, but they learn ultimately how that happens in an urban environment and all the negative pollution and runoff and oil slicks and flooding and bad infrastructure. What can you do to mitigate it? What can you do to mitigate it on a single site such as our campus? And how can you do the research to actually do that? So we have done that and continue to do that and are quite proud of that, I guess. And these are just some photos of our rain gardens on the side of a couple of our buildings. And also these may look like just some neighborhood or parish residents who are just doing some gardening, but these are, ladies and gentlemen, stormwater specialists. They graduated, we certified them, 22 of them, with pomp and circumstance and a little graduation ceremony on the lawn next to our rectory back in June of this year. And they actually have certification. They can get jobs to maintain the growing amount of stormwater infrastructure in our community, which I'm sure is like yours. And typically the folks who get jobs in that industry don't come from neighborhoods like mine. They come from the exurbs and the faraway places and that sort of thing. So I say all that to say that one of our strategies has been, and really the entire mode of resiliency and empowerment, to create this continuous circle around education, employment, economy, and the environment. And we have a 5 E's. We say if you add those 4 together, you get the 5th E, empowerment. And I say that to say that I've been a school administrator for 35 years and worked for a short time in an affluent, well-functioning suburb north of Detroit. And there, if we would have called a meeting of the environmental club on Thursday night, everybody would have come, even if we didn't serve good food. In St. Suzanne's Cody Rouge neighborhood, if I'd call a meeting of the environmental club, I hate to say this with the JPIC award, but that wouldn't have attracted a lot of folks, even if there would have been good food in that. So, but by wrapping this around this holistic and sustainable and etc. Diagram of the 5 E's and really focusing on community resilience, that has gotten a whole bunch of folks involved, both at the youth and for the youth, that creates, at the risk of stating the obvious, a much clearer path to higher education and to careers in STEM and STEAM. For the adults, they can have this economic benefit and also mitigate the costs at home. They can learn. The neighbor across the street comes over and says he's going to do his own rain garden and divert his gutters and all these things. So that's one of the projects that we've been up to. Another little interesting one, this one fits in the category of things you'll never get due credit from your bishop for. I sensed from the earlier conversation there might be a few other things in that bucket, but this is one thing in that bucket. One of the debates we have all the time that Jennifer knows makes me grumpy sometime at the end of the day is within the parish, why are we doing this? Why don't we just go back to renting the building? It'd be easier. How many folks, Steve, have you converted who have come through the RCIA class and become full-time members of St. Suzanne's Parish? Very few. But how many have, witnessed the Catholic presence and the presence of Jesus Christ in our neighborhood because of our efforts? Quite a few. Probably 67,000 at least last year by our account and that. So in the category of things that we don't get credit for necessarily from the Mother Church, it was a couple years ago that we, long story short, so there's a lot of public events on our campus, even before we were operating the community center, and dutifully the parish would always have a little table under a little white tent in the corner of the parking lot. Large back-to-school events with thousands of kiddies coming by and getting their backpacks and their pencils and all these sorts of stuff. And folks would dutifully walk by the parish tent and politely take a pencil or a calculator, and there was nothing else. And 2 of our Adrian Dominican sisters, Cheryl and Annalise, said one year, what if we hang some portraits of prominent black Catholics or folks who, and including those on the road to sainthood, which we spent some time talking about, but those who may just be in business or the government or popular show business or anything else, or literature or what have you, that we may not know have something Catholic in their background or may indeed be Catholic. So we hung those, and sure enough, the conversation was different. Didn't realize that Toni Morrison was Catholic. Didn't realize that Simone Biles was Catholic. Didn't realize that Kobe Bryant spent time in church the morning of his helicopter crash, tragically, and all these sort of things. We got together with the local arts college, the College for Creative Studies, and created a program where some local youth in the Cody Rouge neighborhood ended up spending 2 years researching, iterating, and painting what amounted to 69 portraits of black Catholics. And some, you see some of them here. These are some of the women who were just, we pulled out the women portraits for a Black Catholic Women's Conference at the seminary in Detroit just this past week, so this was the little program cover. But the interesting thing is that of the 18 youth in the Cody Rouge neighborhood who worked on this project, none of them are Catholic. But they spent 2 years researching, iterating, and producing these incredibly, almost museum quality portraits that have started a conversation. And those of us involved are, I didn't know Al Roker was Catholic. Apparently he's mentioned that a couple times along the way. But we have a portrait of Al Roker, and it starts this conversation. So this group of 69 portraits has traveled to 18 sites across the regions of the Archdiocese of Detroit. Schools, the seminary, churches, high schools, community centers, and has been the basis upon a little bit of discussion around some of the things that we don't spend enough time talking about in terms of the contributions of black Catholics and black Catholic spirituality and all those sort of things. And so Carolyn was going to tell me when I was running out of time. I must be getting close to that. 2 minutes? Okay. I'd just tell you about one other little project. Carolyn did a much better job not only of singing than I would try to do, but of quoting the articles in our rule that relate to the work that we're doing. But there's one, Article 6, that also talks about dialogue and apostolic reflection, and creativity. And in that regard, a group of us have convened an anti-racism task force across the regions of the Archdiocese of Detroit over the last 3 years since the tragic death of in Minneapolis several years ago, and really of George Floyd. And really, we got together and said, what could we talk about? And can't do much about that situation, and probably a bunch of churchgoers can't even do much about the criminal justice system and police brutality or anything like that. But we could raise the question about whether or not there is lingering institutional and structural racism in our own mother church. And we've attempted to do that through a lot of dialogue and a lot of letter writing, really trying to ask the leadership of the church in Detroit, would you kindly consider writing a pastoral letter, a pastoral note, perhaps a pastoral plan? We write these on lots of things. Sometimes we write more than one on some things if we feel strongly about them, as some of you know. And but that's only one Detroit in terms of all the struggles that we had in terms of class and race and all these things that exist. There's only one Detroit where we've closed countless schools and churches and everything else, just following the pattern of disinvestment as opposed to further investment in those that need it more. And we think that that should be something that we talk about within our diocese, and we need more of that. So with that, I thank you all. Thank you.